welcome to this final event of this project, Measuring the Cultural and Creative Sector, Measuring CCS. First, technicality, this is going to be recorded. So if any of you has any issue with that, then you should switch to the broadcast through YouTube, which has different parameters. But this Zoom call is being recorded by the host.
Recording in progress.
Correct. So following data protection regulations, we need you all to be aware of this. Now, this is a very interesting project that we are presenting today. We presented the conclusions and having some conversation around it of a project financed by the European Commission, EU financed, which has taken a lot of effort from a group of researchers for more than 2 years. It's a project launched with a very ambitious idea of trying to elaborate a new statistical framework to measure the cultural and creative sector in the European Union. The work has intends to make a long impact across the whole cultural and creative sector in Europe. And that was, of course, entrusted by the Parliament to the Commission and by the Commission to external consortium, which is the people who are talking to you today. This has been a joint work of expert organizations with different skills combined. That's the best way to work in these cases. Strong and proven knowledge in different areas that combined have produced the results that we're going to share with you today. The research effort has been led by Qmetrics, Portugal, who brought decades of experience in statistics, data management, and research. And this was combined with the solid expertise in online and digital economy and research and analysis provided by NTT Data, a global company of Spanish origins, the group in Europe and Latin America, and the respective capabilities in research and analysis on economics and cultural economics of the University of Valencia, collaboration with the Fundación Alternativas. This team has been completed by Culture and Media Agency Europe, Qmetrics. I am a chairman of Qmetrics. And some of the team who are managing this call and supporting technically are part of Qmetrics, who together with Associação Cultural Gerador from Portugal, we have been providing both an interaction with the cultural and creative sector and a knowledge of the cultural stakeholders and everything that relates to the to communication and dissemination around this activity. So the timetable for today's presentation, you have this in your screens. So there are different blocks. First, there's going to be an introduction by George Herzler, who I will follow in a moment. Then there will be a presentation of the project results, which is really the proper substance of this conversation. So what has resulted from this research and what is it proposed to the Commission and to the stakeholders. And then a policy response to discuss about it, and then an interaction. Exactly, a discussion with stakeholders and with some experts. Not trying to be representative, of course, we will not pretend to do that, but to have a discussion on the consequences and the impact on the future and how we see this. And of course, there will be at the end closing remarks on that. You, those who are attending the call, this conversation through Zoom, you have the possibility to put questions through the chat. On the chat, you will see a link to Slido, and through that link, you will be invited to put questions during the different panels, and in particular the last ones, but also for the research, of course. And those who are following this through the YouTube channel, they can follow. You can also put questions through the YouTube channel, although we will not hide that we will give preference through questions which are being put forward by those who registered for the event. And with this, we can move forward. We will see now a kind of overview video which introduces what has been this work. Go ahead. Excellent video. Congratulations, team. Direct and clear. So now let's start with the discussion or the proper presentation to the discussion. I welcome George Heusler, who is the Director for Culture, Creativity and Sport at the European Commission and within its Directorate General for Education and Culture. He has been there recently in this particular function, but of course he has a long experience in EU projects, in EU activity, EU policy, and he has assumed other responsibilities at the European Commission before. So welcome, Mr. Heusler, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ignacy. Good afternoon, everybody, to this event. I think the introduction was already quite colorful and quite informative. I think we wouldn't be sitting here today if we didn't have the initiative of the European Parliament in 2019. I apologize because my screen just went out. If we wouldn't have had this initiative asking for measuring the cultural and creative sectors in the European Union, upon which a project was launched and then financed by Creative Europe to get this work done. Now, EAC, my DG, has been, together with Eurostat, supervising this activity over the last couple of years and following closely with the consortium who won the call this work. I think what makes this particularly interesting is this mix of people from research, people from mathematics and statistics, and people from the creative sector and culture, because I think those put together, you probably don't find them very often. Now, Ignacy, you have already mentioned the different companies, and I don't repeat them here, under the leadership of Qmetrics, who have been working on this. You also know that a number of services in the Commission have been involved in this, notably our colleagues from Connect, from GROW, and from RTD, and from the Europol Observatory in Alicante. I think this has all been very fruitful, and thank you really very much to all of them, some of them being here today, for their contributions. Now, the aim and the objective of this is actually quite ambitious. It's not less but setting a framework for measuring culture and creative sectors in Europe. And that is a big call, really, with some specific objectives. First of all, to offer an updated definition of the scope of the cultural and creative sectors, something which doesn't exist in this form at the moment, with a clear statistical definition of the single sectors. It also has in mind to develop a new methodology for capturing and quantifying online services, whether paid or financed through other sources, also something which in this context we don't have and see yet. The study also wants to build a new statistical framework to allow a better quantification for the cultural and creative sectors, and to make them comparable on the level of the EU, which is so important. I mean, given the different cultures of cultures in the member states, of course, this is a particularly challenging task. And last but not least, to provide an updated economic figures on the cultural and creative sectors at the EU level, because the final aim should be that policy making, if there is policy making in this sector, is also based on reliable and comparable figures. Now, I think we can say, and you will later in the presentation see it, that we clearly see that the consortium has delivered on all these objectives. This will be, I believe, the reference for the future work which will be done in this sector, and it is also, I think, extremely important that it helps to define the main challenges for these sectors, because the figures and stats do give us some clear indications. Now, you're surely aware that the Council next week is adopting its work program for 2023 to 26. And you certainly know that one specific action is planned in context of cultural statistics. And I think this is going very much in the same direction. So this work and this study will certainly be a basis for this work and for this action, which is going to be launched next year together with our colleagues in the Council and in the Parliament. Now, I think what we feel here, and I'm sure that the discussions and the panels will show it, there's a clear momentum for this here now. It's a game-changing element in the policy setting for culture and the creative sector. And this is really the right direction we need to go. Like in all other areas, we need to do good things and we need to be able to show that we are doing good things. And for that, you need indicators, and for indicators, you need facts and figures. So I wish you a very interesting debate, very interesting exchanges this afternoon. And I give the word back to you, Ignacio. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation, which really, defines your very presence, if I may say, defines the importance of this project. So thank you for being here with us and for having said these words. But as I say, your very presence is a witness of the importance the Commission gives to this work. So let's transition to the next part, the presentation of the project results. And let's have a look at the video that tries to summarize, in a way, 2 years of research and work. Thank you. So as you can imagine, this has been the work of individuals, of researchers. I mean, we mentioned before who were the institutions behind this, but let's put a focus on who has actually been there. So this has been an orchestra of people, a small orchestra, but very solid one, of integrated, as we said before, of people with different expertise on mathematics, statistics background, cultural understanding, cultural economics, and a very solid understanding of the online economy. This orchestra has been conducted by Professor Manuel Villares, who will be the first in speaking, but let me first introduce all the leaders of the research team. Each one of them has been also supported by other people, which kind of mentioned here, but they're mentioned in the report. But the leaders of the three main teams, the first one is, as I say, Manuel Villares, who has been until very recently a full professor at Nova Information Management School, which is part of the Universidade Nova de Lisboa, in statistics and econometrics. He was for years a senior advisor to the board of Banco de Portugal. He was president of the National Statistics Institute in Portugal, and I could go on and go on. So he has been, it's a life dedicated to statistics. That could be a good summary for that. Now, the second team working on the full area of the online economy is a team within, as I said before, the entity called Entity Data. And there was one researcher there who left the project once it was already finalized. That's why I want to mention him, even if he's not joining us today, which is Christian Martinez. He has had a very relevant part in this work and in what we're sharing with you today. And he was a senior online economy consultant and research coordinator for a large part of the project. Now, he was helped and strongly supported by another researcher, Giacomo Bullian, who is with us today, business consultant at Entity Data for Europe and Latin America with a background in economics and management, and also, of course, an expert in online economy, and he will be presenting that part of the research. And then we have another team which provided the expertise with a more academic background on culture and economics and the crossroads between both. And it's really a team of luxury, a first level, first class, first league, a Premier League team composed by Pau Rausei, professor and economist, lecturer at the Department of Applied Economics at the University of Valencia, director of the research area in economics and culture, researcher with the Fundación Alternativas, and with a solid long time itinerary and curriculum on these crossroads of culture and economics. And the other professor from Valencia who has been very active here is Rafael Bosch Domènech, who is professor of applied economics at the University of Valencia and also a member of its Department of Economic Structure and of the economics of the unit for economics of culture research within that university, Econcult. So this has been the leaders of the three blocks, which of course now compose an integrated report. And I will leave the floor to Manuel Villares and the other researchers to present in due order the different sections of this report. Professor Villares, you're welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ignacio. I'm going to share the screen. Do you see? I think.
I think this went too fast, your presentation.
No, excuse me. I was instead of doing page up, I was doing page down.
Yes,
so
yes. We saw your full presentation. Okay. It's a spoiler.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's nice, even if there is a small little problem like this. So first of all, I will say that it's a great honor to me to do a presentation to a so distinguished so distinguished audience. And my presentation will be quite brief because what I will go to say today, it is well explained, detailed explained and justified in a final report that was already delivered to the European Commission. If I go now to my presentation, basically it has four parts. One of them is to present the project objectives, recall the project objectives because they already been said even today. Then I will to speak briefly on shortcomings of current framework. Then, boom. The presentation will be about the update framework for CCS statistics, and finally, I will give one last slide for presenting some final remarks. If I enter in project objectives, as you know very well, and they have already been recalled today, there are basically three main objectives. First one is to propose an update framework with a new definition of the scope of the cultural and creative sectors. This is basic topic of my presentation. There are two additional objectives that will be spoken by my colleagues. One of them is to develop a new methodology for capturing and quantify online services. Another one is to provide updated economic figures on CCS at the national and EU level. If I'm going now to shortcomings of current situation, I will say that the main shortcoming of the current situation is that the current framework that I think most of you know, that was proposed about 10 years ago by the SSNet culture, was not implemented the same way by the Eurostat and by the EU member states. While Eurostat strictly follows the SSNet culture framework, with updates approved by the Eurostat Working Group on Culture Statistics, several EU member states choose other options. So you have the same activities are classified in a different way by Eurostat and by the member states. To give you an example, I could give a lot of examples, but to give you an example. Of the 42 activities classified as fully cultural by Eurostat, only 17, so much less than one half, are also classified fully cultural by all the EU member states. So basically all the other activities are classified differently by Eurostat and by member states. So an important consequence of this situation is that for several of the member states, we have two scopes or definitions of what is cultural and creative sectors. The scope adopted by Eurostat, one, and another scope adopted by the member state itself. There are even different denominations for cultural and creative sectors in the EU member states. We have identified 8 definitions, 8 denominations. You have here the 5 denominations that are used by more countries. You can have forest culture, culture and creative industries, culture and creative sectors, cultural industry. So you have here all this represent the same, or want to mean the same thing. So one good question that I think that could be placed by some of you is that why the existence of 2 definitions, or it means 2 lists of activities for CCS statistic in several member states, the one adopted by Eurostat and the other adopted by the member state, why the existence of the 2 definitions is a limitation. But I will say not is only a limitation, it's a big and important limitation. And this I will say basically by 3 reasons. First, it's the source of confusion for the users, and users, I have to say that they are the main stakeholders of the CCS statistics. In fact, when they use this data, they have 2 different data for the same variables, for instance, for cultural employment or cultural production. They have 2 different values for this. Okay, what is a source of confusion and also hampers the comparability of data across member states. Second, this situation is one of the main reasons why several mandatory statistics at EU level are little or not at all usual internal in several member states to analyze the cultural and creative sector. These countries, some of these member states, instead of using this mandatory statistics at EU level, they prefer to do specific national surveys. In doing this, what means that this situation is also a source of waste resource of the national statistics system, which duplicates which once there is a duplication of statistical service, and this duplication of statistical service also increases the burden on the respondents. So this is another problem. So the change of this situation implies the reclassification of several activities. But another important limitation of the current situation is the insufficient use of administrative sources. In fact, the use of administrative source is insufficiently developed in most EU member states, despite the critical advantages of the statistical sources that are still enlarged in the case of the CCS statistics. That means in this case, particularly as it is explained in the report, in this case specifically, the administrative source have additional advantage to the other advantage that we all of us know very well. So another limitation of the current framework deals with cultural practices of the population that are, without any doubt, the most important dimension of the sustainability of the cultural sector. Despite several improvements, it continues to be very challenging and difficult to produce comparable data on cultural participation for all EU member states. we see that the measurement of cultural participation at EU level has not significantly improved since 2012. That means in the last 10 years. And in our opinion, this was largely due to no fulfillment of the SSNet recommendation of 2012, that was to develop a model on cultural participation with a questionnaire that could be included within a survey covering sports, social, and civic participation. This recommendation was not followed. In our opinion, is one of the reasons why in last 10 years there was not important development in this field. So let's now go to present the update framework for CCS statistics. First, about our approach. Basically, our approach is similar to the approach that the SSNet culture adopted in 2012 for the presenting the European framework for cultural statistics in 2012. So it means that the main objective is still to define CCS in statistical terms, i.e. to choose those activities considered cultural and creative, and thus redefine and better delimitate the current cultural and creative sectors when needed. So, in conclusion, our main task is to update the current definition that was proposed in 2012 by SSNet Culture with updates that have been approved by Eurostat working group in culture statistics in 2015, 16, and 18. But as you know, one of the points that I have said, it is important to reclassify several activities. At this moment, they are classified differently from Eurostat and from the member state. So for this to reclassify, as you know, that is a very sensitive topic. We need use criteria that should be as objective and as clear as possible. We have adopted 3 general criteria for classification. First, the change in scope must be based upon a high consensus among the EU member states. What this means that we will reclassify those codes or those activities for when there is low consensus. If there is high consensus in the classification, we don't in general, we don't change naturally that classification. So only those classifications that where there is low consensus are candidates to be reclassified. Second, the change in the scope integrated cultural and creative activities using a world standard. The idea will be to use international statistical classification, but in this field, we don't have international statistical classification. So you use a proxy that is a world standard. Finally, the change in scope are ready to integrate the revisions of the international statistical classification as soon as they are available. This is clear, an important point, an important criteria. A detailed justification of this criteria, you can find them in the report. Well, there is a particular point is because we use those criteria to reclassify partly cultural activities. So basically, one question would be, why use different criteria to reclassify partly cultural activity? The reason is very clear. As you know, a partly cultural activity results from the aggregation of activities that are cultural and activities that are not cultural. What happens quite often, we don't know the activity or the activity, you don't know the importance, we don't know what is the activity, so the activity that is cultural. So, and as you don't know this, we don't know also the aggregate. What does, in this case, Eurostat and most EU member states, they don't measure. So they take a very conservative position. As you don't know, we don't measure. What happens is that there is a systematic underestimation of the CCS, of the importance of the CCS cultural and creative sectors, and there is a systematic underestimation. So we want to avoid this. And what means that for these activities that are classified partly cultural, we will reclassify in culture or not culture, even in case of when there is a high consensus in this classification. The idea is to avoid a systematic underestimation. So clear, we use in this case criteria that are very close and very close, and they inspired in general criteria. So we use the general criteria, and for partial cultural activities, you use this criteria for partial cultural activities. And most of the codes that you need to reclassify are reclassified. But there are some codes that you cannot classify using this criteria. In this case, you submit the code or the activity to qualitative analysis that is conducted by experts and stakeholders from the cultural and creative sectors. In the present case, this qualitative analysis was conducted through a stakeholder input session that took place in last May. And with this qualitative analysis, we effectively reclassified 5 codes. All the other codes were classified using the other criteria. All the other codes that have to be reclassified. So using these three ways, that means the general criteria for partial cultural activities and also the qualitative analysis, we reclassify the codes, and some codes are included in the update scope, other codes are excluded. So the codes, because they are included, because the reference to these 10 codes that have been included, and they include the main reason because they comply with the criteria. So this is the main reason. So you have here 10 codes that have been included. For some cases, from some specific codes, because they are particularly important, there are extra reasons, or beyond the fact that they comply with the criteria, there are extra reasons that are explained in the report. You have here also 6 codes that have been excluded from the update scope. I would like today, we don't, in fact, that we exclude these codes from the scope. We don't mean that theoretical or objectively these codes are not culturally creative. No, we have not, we don't enter in this discussion. What we mean is according to our criteria. This means that these codes should not be included in the list of those CCS codes that are monitored in a regular basis. Is this what you basically mean? And you do not talk a position about if they are theoretical or not theoretical. This is pragmatic reason according to the criteria that you have been chosen. So now recommended update scope. Well, recommended update scope for CCS is by definition equal to the current scope by including the 10 codes that were added and by eliminating the 6 codes that have been excluded. As it was expected and desired, most of the codes of the update scope, so we were talking about 37 of the 47 codes, come from the current scope, which gives the desired stability to the frameworks. That means we don't change very strong the framework, and this was also something that we intend to do. So concerning the denomination, it is recommended, as you have said, there are 8 denominations, but we recommend to maintain the current denomination of cultural and creative sector. The main reason for this recommendation are given in the report, but I associate our perception that this denomination is a quite neutral and comprehensive denomination, and also that is currently one of the most used denominations of the EU context and in the member states. So in summary, let me see in summary what we propose. It is recommended that all the member states adopt the same denomination, cultural and creative sectors, and same definition in terms of necessary 2 codes for CCS. So if we do this, I will think that will be a big achievement. The ideal situation will be that the document with the denomination and the definition of CCS upon its approval by the Eurostat Working Group on Cultural Statistics be consecrated in a new regulation. Concerning the customization by the EU member states of the EU definition of cultural and creative sectors, it is recommended the segregation of codes of the definition adopted at EU level. This is quite similar to what we do when you have an international classification of activities and you want to customize this international classification of activities for national level. So this is the same approach. The main, I will emphasize that in this case, the main reclassification criteria that is adopted, that is the consensus among member states, also helps to accommodate in the recommended scope several differences between the currently adopted scopes. That means that this criteria was contribute for the customization already. Concerning the greater use of administrative source to produce CCS statistics, it is recommended basically the following. Use administrative source as the primary source to produce statistics on cultural and creative enterprise, and as a second complementary source to produce two other types of statistics, that are cultural and creative employment and international trade in cultural and creative goods and services. I would like to emphasize here that a greater use of administrative source will reduce the cost of CCS statistics, the burden on the respondents, and at the same time, in this case, it will increase the quality and reliability of the data. Concerning now the production of comparable data at EU level on cultural participation, it is recommending the adoption of a model of questions on cultural participation at EU level. In certain way, is to take the proposal that was carried out 10 years ago by SSNet Culture. But of course, this model will be updated, not be the same model that was proposed 10 years ago. The model should be preferably used as a standalone survey, making the first EU harmonized survey in the cultural and creative sector. I would like to emphasize, sometimes because you say, but you will increase the burden on the respondents. No, this survey will decrease the burden on the respondents, since it will replace the current harmonized national surveys on cultural participation and the questions on cultural participation that are currently used in the harmonized European and the European surveys. In summer, there will be a big rationalization of what is done now. That is a big confusion and a wasting of resources. Well, I'm finished. We have also analyzing the economic impacts of the recommended change in scope. What we did for 4 variables: gross value added, employment, exports, imports, and also external trade suppliers. We compute what was in current scope, what was in the update scope, and what was concluded. That the gross value added in update scope is higher, 6.9%. The employment is also higher. And talking about the data for 2019, exports are also high and imports are lower. What means that basically the external trade surplus are almost more than double. So pass from 3,000 this value to this, more than double. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that the recommended scope increased the economic importance of the CCS sector. So let me say now 5 last remarks. First, the project has several challenges, since measuring cultural and creative sector is not an easy task. If you will see our inventory of source, you will see there all the difficulties that exist, and are many difficulties. So we have carried out an exhaustive inventory of source of the current CCS statistics that we believe has not been done so far. Based on this inventory, we produced a set of recommendations, and we are convinced that they will improve the current measurement of CCS in EU when implemented. More, this recommendation will also decrease the cost of CCS statistics and the burden on the respondents, and at the same time will increase the economic importance of CCS. Finally, I would like to use this opportunity to thank all the participants in our events, that you have had several events, and in particular the statistical authorities of the member states and Eurostat for their very useful collaboration, particularly during the inventory of source. However, the responsibility of the recommendation as well as an eventual error are entirely of the consortium. So I will conclude here my presentation. Of course, I'm completely available for discussion, and I will pass now the floor to my colleague Giacomo.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Manuel.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Yes, I'll share my screen. Okay, please let me know. Can you all see my slides? No. Let's see if it comes up. Yes, no.
Yes, we can see it. We can see it,
Okay,
Giacomo.
yes,
It's okay. Please go
There they
ahead.
are. Perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. As Ignazi mentioned before, I'll just briefly reintroduce myself. I'm Giacomo Bullian. I work as a business consultant at Entity Data. And today I will present you the results of the work strand that we carried out on our proposal for a new methodology to measure digital cultural services. So as part of this new methodology, we had two main objectives. Our first objective was to propose an update to the traditional tools of the cultural statistics framework, which includes a revision of the current surveys and statistical tools that make up the framework in order to enable the onboarding of indicators on the digital economy. And as a second objective, we also wanted to explore some alternative and innovative methods of data collection to measure digital cultural services. And this included, on one end, a demonstration of the feasibility of using new approaches based on data analytics to collect data from online platforms and service providers. And on another hand, to explore some alternative methods that can be used to collect information directly from digital actors of the cultural and creative sectors. I will briefly outline the methodological approach that we followed during our research, and then I will dive into more details while presenting the different results. Our methodological approach was composed of 4 different phases. We started as a first phase with the definition of some key dimensions to measure digital cultural services, which included, as a first step, the definition of the sectorial scope of the CCS by mapping the sectors according to the Creative Europe definition to the economic activities of the NACE classification. Secondly, we defined a 6 dimension of digital culture that would enable us to capture the digital economy. And we did so basing ourselves on previously established methodologies, such as the Digital Economy and Society Index from DigiConnect and the Digital Transformation Monitor of DigiGrow. Following this phase, we stepped in a phase of research and analysis, where we first carried out a gap analysis against the current statistical tools of the cultural statistics framework. We then investigated indicators on the digital economy from a variety of sources at European and international level. We have also collected insights mainly through desk research, but also from experts of the CCS through different project events. In a third phase, we then made a proposal of digital economy indicators. So we first identified existing digital economy indicators that could integrate the framework based on our research of the previous phase. We have also defined some new potential indicators that could cover the gaps that we had identified in the current framework. And this resulted in a proposal of indicators, both existing and new, for each of the digital cultural dimensions that we have defined. On top of all of this, and in line with the second objective that I presented before, we have also analyzed some new means to collect data from digital actors, which included, on one end, the definition of this data analytics methodology to capture some metrics on digital services with a scope that focus on music and audiovisual. And we have also defined another alternative approach to use a targeted survey for digital actors. And I will also detail this further later in the presentation. Looking at the results on our first objective, on the first part, on the updates to the traditional tools of the cultural statistics framework, as I was mentioning, we first defined 6 different dimensions of digital culture, which include, on one end, 3 dimensions that can be considered enablers, basically dimensions that are enabling factors for CCS organizations to thrive in digitalization. And this includes setting up an appropriate digital infrastructure, having dedicated investment to digitalization, as well as proper human capital in terms of expertise and skills. We have also defined 3 dimensions that reflect the modern value chain of the CCS, from production to distribution and consumption. And these include phenomena such as the upload and exchange of digital content, the use of digital services, e-commerce, and more. Following this first phase of definition of the dimensions, as I was saying in the beginning, we carried out this gap analysis, and we did so against 8 surveys and statistical tools of the framework, including the labor force survey, structural business statistics, the EU survey on income and living conditions, and more. And we have also investigated indicators from seven different sources at European and international level, starting from Eurostat as a starting point, but also looking at databases and data sets from other organizations such as the United Nations, the OECD, the World Economic Forum, and more. In addition, we have also gathered expert knowledge. We gathered more than 60 relevant insights through the different project events, through the hackathon and the stakeholder input sessions that were then used for the formulation of the indicators. All in all, we defined 115 different indicators on the digital economy. 87 of these indicators were already existing. We identified them from the existing sources, and we proposed their integration in the current framework. And 28 were newly proposed indicators. Looking at some examples, I will not go in detail through all the examples that are outlined in this slide, and of course the full list of indicators is available in the final report of the project. But for instance, if we look at the dimension of human capital, we identified an existing indicator on the ease of finding skilled employees, and we defined a new indicator on the percentage of ICT occupations that are part of total employment in the CCS. While looking at the digital cultural dimensions, for example, at consumption, we identified an existing indicator on online purchases in terms of tickets to cultural events, but we have also defined a new indicator on the diffusion of certain online activities among internet users, such as the use of social media, making online sales, creating content, and so forth. Moving to the second part, and in line with our second objective, so complementary to these updates to the traditional tools of the cultural statistics framework, we have also explored new and alternative methods to collect information and data on the use of digital cultural services. And with this respect, we basically focused on two things. We did two things. The first one was to develop a demonstrator of data analytics capabilities, which collected data from selected platforms and online service providers of the CCS, in order to track some metrics that could be assimilated to the production, distribution, and consumption of cultural and creative content online, with a scope that focused in particular on the music and audiovisual sectors. And I will discuss this in detail in a moment. And secondly, we have also proposed a targeted approach that can be used to survey digital actors to obtain information directly from them, in order to capture some data, metrics, and information that is normally outside of the scope of traditional surveys. Looking a bit more in detail at what we did in the approach for the data analytics demonstrator, our objective for this part was to make use of data analysis technologies on sources of public available information from different online platforms and service providers, in order to demonstrate that it is feasible to collect metrics at high frequency on production, distribution, and consumption of music and audiovisual content online. For this approach, we have selected two targeted platforms, and in particular, we selected YouTube and Spotify, representing the audiovisual and music sectors respectively. And we made this selection based on two factors. The first one being the popularity and market share that these two platforms have, given their wide user bases, wide use also at European level, and the content catalogs that they present, which is also very wide. And secondly, because of the feasibility of the approach, since both of these platforms present publicly available APIs, which are application programming interfaces, which basically enable the exchange of data between IT systems, and were the mean through which we were able to extract data on a regular basis from these platforms. Looking at the methodology a bit more in detail, what we did was to set up some mechanisms to send queries, which are sort of requests to IT systems that were targeting the APIs of these two platforms in order to retrieve metrics on the use of digital services on the platform, such as the number of views, likes, comments on videos, number of followers, subscribers, and more. And I'll present them a bit more in detail in a second. But first, it's important to mention that we also run into some limitations of the approach related to the type of information that can be retrieved and that can be gathered from these platforms, including information, for instance, on individual user accounts, financial information or economic data on monetization of videos, or also historical data. Now, moving on and looking a bit more in detail with respect to the technical parts of the methodology, we collected data for a period of 7 weeks from the beginning of May to end of June. And what we did for both platforms was to define a sample of content to be tracked for the whole period of observation. So on YouTube, we selected the top 10 videos and top 10 channels per each of the 27 EU member states. And similarly, on Spotify, we selected the top 10 songs and top 10 artists for each EU country. And we did so based on some rankings that are elaborated from the platforms themselves. On YouTube, we have also looked at dynamic ranking of the top 100 videos per EU country in order to track the evolution of this ranking over time. Secondly, for both platforms, we have also selected certain metrics to be collected. So as I was mentioning before, for instance, for channels on YouTube, we have looked at the total number of views of this channel, number of subscribers, their category, and also how many videos are uploaded over time. On Spotify, we looked at the number of songs and albums published by an artist, their number of followers, and we have also looked at other metrics related to views, likes, comments, popularity on Spotify. And in addition, it is also important to mention that the frequency of data collection. So on YouTube, we were able to collect data at hourly intervals, so 24 times a day. While on Spotify, we were able to collect data at daily intervals, since this is the refresh rate of the data, let's say, on Spotify. Before moving on, I'll also briefly mention that we have, of course, found some technical challenges. I won't go into many details on this part, but for instance, there were bots on YouTube which inflated the number of views of some videos, or channels that have private insights, issues related to tokens on Spotify. Again, I won't get too much in details, but the important thing is that we were able to overcome these challenges and successfully implement the approach. And looking a bit now at the results of this approach, first of all, it's important to say that the approach achieved this objective and demonstrated that it is indeed feasible to collect metrics at high frequency from online platforms and service providers of the culture and creative sectors. All in all, we collected data for a period of over 40 days for both platforms and for all the different samples of content that we have defined, and we were able to collect 12 different metrics across YouTube and Spotify for the period of observation. And of course, this resulted in the generation of a very vast data set, which contained in the end over 2.2 million different observations. In addition, we have also conducted some simple and preliminary analysis on the collected data. And for example, we can see here on the map on the right, we looked at digital consumption habits and cultural proximity across different countries. And for instance, what we did here was to look at the YouTube channels, so at the top 10s of the YouTube channels across different countries, to see what were the channels in common. And we found, of course, similarities among countries that, for instance, share the same language, such as Germany and Austria, or Cyprus and Greece. And we also found similarities in the consumption patterns of the Baltic countries, for instance. In addition to this, we have also elaborated some rankings of member states that reflected the production, distribution, and consumption of content on these platforms based on the metrics that we have tracked. These rankings are based on some aggregations, and they are available as well in the final report of the project. To conclude on this part, I'll briefly present what we did for our proposal for a targeted approach, for a targeted survey to digital platforms. So our rationale here was to design targeted surveys that could be directed at digital actors of the CCS, mainly including online platforms and service providers, in order to capture some more relevant and granular data on for instance, the activities, on the users of these platforms, on their different revenue streams, and so on. So what we did as part of this approach was to identify some preliminary lists of actors. Here you can see some examples on this slide, but we have also provided some additional examples in the report. And we also looked at what could be some mechanisms to extend this further and identify other actors at member state level. So, for instance, one example would be to use the pan-European portal Agorateka from WIPO, which contains a list of websites that are aggregators of legal digital services offering across EU countries. So this could be a starting point to identify further actors at member state level, or for example using portals like Mavise from the European Audiovisual Observatory or ProMusic. What we also did in this part was to identify indicators similarly to before. So we have identified 24 indicators and also relevant questions and explanations that are included as well in the final report. And just to give an example, we identified indicators on revenues with breakdowns with download revenues, streaming revenues, ad-supported revenues. We have also looked at catalogs in terms of both diversity, including, for instance, if a certain platform presents music content, songs, rather than audiovisual, and if it's audiovisual, what type of audiovisual content, film, TV series, documentaries, and so forth, and also the extent of these catalogs. And finally, also indicators on number of users with breakdowns that, of course, are applicable across different platforms. So this depends on the specific nature of the platforms. But for example, premium users, free users, registered users, and more. And as I said, the full list of indicators is present in the final report. To conclude, I would like to quickly present our recommendations. So our first recommendation is in line with the first objective presented in the beginning, and it is to make the necessary updates to the EU Cultural Statistics Framework to onboard the digital economy. We have seen that our work represents a first contribution to the advancement of the statistical representation of the CCS. And in line with this, we recommend to validate the integration of existing indicators, as well as to validate the addition of the newly proposed indicators. Secondly, and more in line with the second objective that we presented, we recommend to first prepare the ground for using these innovative and alternative methods, which includes, on one end, performing an analysis on the relevance, coherence, and effectiveness of using such methods to support decision making. As well as carrying out a specific study on how to design the implementation of these approaches, and investing in infrastructure and expertise in terms of skills, resources, and so forth. Thirdly, we recommend to upscale the data analytics capabilities. We have seen from the demonstrator that it was possible to collect very vast amounts of data in a very short period of time. But here we recommend to collect data for a longer period in order to enable more regular and consistent analysis. And also to extend the scope of platforms to be queried, to be analyzed, both in terms of looking at other platforms besides YouTube and Spotify, but also looking at other sectors outside music and audiovisual. Finally, we recommend to further develop the approach for the targeted survey. Once again, to expand the scope. In terms of indicators, we have proposed an initial list of indicators, but of course, this could be expanded. And also in terms of sectors, as we have mainly focused on music, audiovisual, and video games, and there could be other sectors that can be explored. And also to set up mechanisms to identify digital economy actors at member state level, as we have suggested, with the idea finally to implement the approach in order to collect this first-hand information on revenues, employment, and user characteristics, among the others. So this is it for this part. Sorry, I know I've been very quick, but oh. Okay, I'm trying to stop the sharing. I would like to thank you for the attention and to pass the floor now to my colleagues from Fundación Alternativa, Pau and Rafael. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. Well, as we knew that we were the last, so we will rush a little bit not to go out of the timetable prepared. So we must emphasize that we are a research team from the University of Valencia, that we have been dealing with cultural and creative economics or economy for more than 20 years, and that these 2 years to the last 2 years have been very intense, and there is a constant interaction with the colleagues of the consortium and the colleagues and members, stakeholders from outside, ranging from Eurostat to the EUPO in Alicante. That has been a very fruitful connection, and we try to embed the sensitivities of the different several DGs. So in this report, we present evidence not only of the economic dimension of the cultural and creative sectors, and from the data obtained from a more or less homogeneous, modular and comparable proposal, but we try also to make some exercise of measuring the effects and real impacts that the dimension of culture can have on variables as important as the productivity or the multiplier effects of the cultural and creative sector, or the relationship between the size of the cultural and creative sectors and some of the dimension of well-being. So, but we need to make some or certain distinction as the data on macroeconomic aggregates are we can say are proven data or evidence-based, and there is some consensus about the practices. There are some consolidated practices to ensure that there is some kind of real, we can say, real and complete data. The implication on productivity or the multipliers on the welfare impacts and so on, we can say that there is another exploratory exercise, but we are very proud of this exercise to show and to put some evidence that the effects of cultural and creative sectors goes beyond the economic dimension. So in this part, we use, of course, the basic definition of the CCS elaborated in the previous phase, with those incorporation and those codes that are now out. But we try to group in an innovative way, we can say, that it is consistent with this proposed update of the framework for cultural statistics. But with this aggregation, we think that we made some sense for the interpretation of we can say regular citizens or normal citizens, and of course could be useful for the different views perceived from the discussion with and meetings from different DGs and the several national cultural statistics services. We want to emphasize, to underline that we cannot analyze the cultural and creative sectors isolated. This is a part of an ecosystem, and the actions over the cultural and creative sectors, also from the perspective or from the statistic perspective, should notice that there is an ecosystem, and this is the cultural and creative sector are part of a very complex map, and that the actions over the cultural and creative sectors are related with the action or the policies, the educative policies, the economic policies, the research policies. So there is a big complexity in this approach. Well, first of all, we try to compile the data for the countries of the European Union with this approach, and around 3 basic magnitudes, that is added value, labor or employment, and international trade. One of the limitations of the European statistic is that Eurostat does not yet have any database that provides homogeneous data on added value and labor for all sectors, and with this disaggregation necessary to apply the classification, which is in some case 4 digits. In this aspect, we have been very practical. We have solved the problem by crossing 3 of the Eurostat database. That means national accounts, labor force survey, and structural business statistics. And in some very specific case, for very small codes, we have also used additional data from business registers if there was no other option. We have established these methods and controls to facilitate the comparability between the Eurostat database, and overall the results has been satisfactory. For international trade data from Eurostat, an approximation based on the classification by products have been used. This has allowed us to apply the classification of the CCS from the previous phase of the project, as well as to carry out test and analysis of sensitivity to the inclusion and exclusion of certain sectors. The measurement have been made for the period 2008 to 2021 for the analysis of the labor force or the employment, and from 2008 to 2019 for the added value. We can say that in this period, the number of people working on the CCS have not recovered to the figures before the financial or the big recession. They have gone from 5.5 million in 2008 to 5.49 million in 2021. So we can say that both the creative and core cultural sector groups increase in the relative importance by a few points to the relative decline of the cultural industries group over this period. However, if we analyze the gross value added, on the other hand, the data of the figure from 2008 has improved, or has going further the values of the 2008 year. So there is evidence of an improvement in the labor productivity. Despite the relative decline, the main contribution of the value added comes from the cultural industries group that implies more or less the 45% in 2019. That is the last year that we get data. So we can see that about the 60% of the employment and added value in the EU27 are concentrated in only 4 big countries. That is not strange, with the particularity that in terms of added value, the 4th largest economy is Ireland, due to the huge concentration of headquarters of big corporations. The relative importance to the total employment varies between Estonia with 3.8% and Romania with only 1.2%. In terms of added value, it varies from between Malta, 6.1%, and Luxembourg with 1.8%. Probably the 2 countries are more or less outliers of this approach. Since 2009, there has been a steady growth in international trade in cultural goods, which was obviously cut in the year of the pandemic. The trade balance is positive and more or less stabilized below the 10 billion euros, sorry, between 2013 and 2019. The situation, as you can see in the figures, are very diverse between Czechia, this is a more open country in the cultural and creative sectors, to Romania, there is more the less open country in the list of European countries. Then we try to, or we develop models to measure the direct contribution in terms of employment, added value, and labor productivity. And we have addressed the total effects of CCS of the economy of the EU27. The total effect, that is the direct and indirect effects on labor productivity, has been measured using a semi-endogenous growth model. This is a robust causal framework that has already been used in other studies to measure these effects, and the model has been implemented for the 27 European countries in the period 2008-2019, and for the estimation, and we use a non-parametric procedure that allows non-linearities to be taken into account and produce individualized coefficients for each country and year. The results suggest that in average, the effects of the CCAs on the labor productivity in European economies is small, and this is if the share of CCS in employment were doubled, labor productivity would increase by an average of 1.25%, about 700 euros on average. Although these effects are very heterogeneous between countries, being greater for Ireland, Denmark, Hungary, and Finland, and may have negative average effects for countries such as Estonia, Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Romania. A second framework has been introduced to measure the economic effects of CCAs. For this, we use the multi-country input-output table from the OECD, and we can calculate the multipliers of different or several sectors as our group. Is not the same aggregation that we use in the previous exercise, but for the publishing, media, and music and broadcasting group, the largest effect on value added are observed in Ireland, as you can see in the first figure. For the publishing, media, and music and broadcasting group, the largest effects on value added are observed in Ireland. And sorry, for the software and IT, the greatest effects are observed in Germany, and again in the artistic and entertainment activities that include sectors from 90 to 93. The major effect is in Ireland again. And then we explore the possibilities to measure the impacts of cultural and creative sectors in the well-being of countries, and we use the OECD well-being scores, and we can see that are very heterogeneous in the European country, being higher for the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, and lower for Greece, Latvia, Portugal, and Lithuania. In the final part of the work, so we make estimation, a first approximation to collect the effects of the CCS on the dimension of well-being using the OECD data for European countries. In this case, the methodology is very experimental and the model used is very simple, so it's not free from confounding factors for some of the indicators, and the results must be interpreted as preliminary and with great caution. The largest, we can see that the largest effects of CCS on well-being scores seems to be found in Finland, Sweden, and Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, and the lowest in Portugal, Hungary, and Slovakia. And we use all these indicators for each country in the fact sheets for each country that we elaborate for each country. So we repeat more or less this approach about the figures that we have showed now. So that's. Thank you for your attention, and I give the floor to Ignacy.
Thank you. And let me say, I mean, we've been partners here, but I need to say congratulations, my friends. You've done an amazing job, and then to listen to the conclusions of all this report now, one after the other together, it's pretty impressive. I am sure that everybody attending here, and almost 100 people who are following you via YouTube as well, whom I welcome to this final event as well, of course, besides those who are following us through Zoom. Really, it's impressive. It's impressive the work we've done. So now let's move to have a kind of a policy-related angle, a policy-related approach. And we will start that with a video intervention from Member of the European Parliament, Christian Eller. Now, Christian Eller is the actual member who started this, because as it was said before, this was an initiative at the European Parliament, and it was Christian Eller, who is vice chairman of the CDU-CSU group, so German MEP, and vice chairman of the CDU-CSU group at the European Parliament. He's been a member of the European Parliament since 2004. He's doctor in political science. He has a very strong European expertise. And he's the one who actually promoted and pushed the European Parliament to vote for what ended being the project we're presenting today. So let's listen what Christian Eller has to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to address you at the final event of this important research project. 10 years ago, a small group of MEPs started the intergroup on CCIs because we saw the economic and innovation potential of this economic sector. At the time, it was seen as an obscure effort. The sector was not well understood politically nor economically for that matter. But we insisted, and sometimes politics is about endurance. Through this initiative, we created momentum for a political understanding of CCIs. However, it became increasingly clear that we needed to be able to reflect the sector in statistics to solidify this understanding. That is why we started this project. When I initiated this project in 2019, we were still in a very different place, and Europe didn't have an industrial policy for the creative industry. What we did have was a parliamentary report from 2016 outlining the potential of the cultural and creative industries. In this report, we laid actually the foundation for the cultural and creative industries to be considered as a fully fledged economic sector in Europe. We outlined the importance of the CCIs for the European economy. We showed that CCIs are a unique selling point for the European economy. However, to put the CCIs on the map of the European policy, we needed to make the sector tangible for policymakers. This meant that we needed to be able to measure the sector. This meant we needed this pilot project. Now we have the results, and they come right in time. The political understanding of CCIs has matured over the last few years. The CCIs have been recognized as one of the 14 ecosystems at the heart of the European industrial policy. We have a dedicated research budget for CCIs of 2.4 billion euros. We are setting up an EIT knowledge and innovation community for CCIs. We are creating a platform for CCIs to develop a shared innovation agenda. And the CCIs also play a central role in the European Bauhaus movement initiated by President Ursula von der Leyen. These are great achievements. However, our policy on CCIs is not yet mature. For it to become mature, it needs to be considered as a central part of the European economy. It needs to be seen as a sector that is part of our economic foundation, like the car industry, like the chemical industry. Making the sector and its economic impact visible in statistics is a crucial part of that development. We have the tools to make this happen now. This is another piece of an almost completed puzzle, and I really want to thank the consortium for these great results. And I look forward to our continued cooperation to develop and strengthen the European CCIs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, really. This was excellent, Member of Parliament Eller. And now let's listen to the Council. So we have the Council here represented. I mean, what kind of representation? Let's not be too accurate, but anyway, representing in the largest sense of the word, of course, by Heidi Meisnitzer, who is Councillor for Culture and Media Policy within the Federal Ministry of the Arts, and she is therefore at the permanent representation of Austria to the European Union. She has been covering different EU files in different areas, but she's been involved for quite a long time in cultural policy. She has a very strong experience, both with her Austrian perspective and with the European perspective within working groups and within the Council Coreper now. Coreper at the working groups there, so specifically on the culture area. So with that, we'd like to hear from you. Heidi, what do you want to share with us with a policy perspective here?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you for
Very well.
inviting me to contribute from a member state perspective and also from a council perspective to this very important event. As you mentioned, I have worked almost or more than 20 years for the cultural and for the creative sectors, either at the EU level or at the national level. And I witnessed that the role and importance, and especially the perception of the cultural and the creative sectors have changed a lot over these years. With the exceptions of the pandemic, the cultural and the creative sectors have developed and performed very positively in a very impressive and remarkable way, and this in many terms. It has been already mentioned also by Mr. Ehler, the importance and dynamic role of the cultural and the creative sectors for economic growth, employment, social cohesion, diversity, and also now well-being, which is becoming more and more important, and has been already referred by other speakers, is more and more recognized. And this recognition has developed not least because of accompanying cultural data and research done by many different actors, and provides a clear indication of the importance and the necessity of cultural statistics for the perceptions and the understanding of the cultural and the creative sectors. What became also clear, and especially during the pandemic, that the CCIs, even performing very well, are less resilient than we thought, and they have to be still better known in terms of its organizational structures, for example, working practice and structural needs in general. And dealing with the consequences of the pandemic and measuring and understanding the impact of the pandemic remains a challenging task at all governance levels. From my long experience, I can confirm that the topic of cultural statistics was always on the agenda in the cultural area. Sometimes it was more present, sometimes a little bit less, depending on the political priorities. I would like to recall, because myself, I was a little bit surprised. There was a first council conclusions from 1995 on the promotion of statistics and culture and economic growth. And it's no big surprise that some of the ideas, suggestions, and recommendations formulated back at that time are still very relevant. But, and it's also obvious, a lot happened, and especially in the last years, many efforts have been made at the European level and also at the international level, to mention the Council of Europe, initiatives by UNESCO, Eurostat together with the Commission and the statistical institutes in the member states, and of course within the European Parliament, and with many other initiatives, constant progress has been achieved. And this pilot project is also a very important contribution to further and needed improvements. However, and we have to keep it in mind, cultural statistics is a labor-intensive and complex task, and resources are needed for the work to be done and to achieve further improvement. We all know that the European cultural ecosystem is not homogeneous, and the cultural and creative sectors and its subsectors have very different sectoral realities and contexts. And this diversity has to be taken into consideration, and various studies highlight the lack of systematic data across sectors and across Europe. I would like to mention that at the European level in the Council, the member states are working together on the basis of so-called work plans for culture. This work plan is a strategic instrument for the ministers of culture, which lays down the topics of common and shared interest. Under the current work plan for culture, which is coming to an end this year, 6 priorities and 17 actions were defined for the implementation of these priorities. And for example, cultural statistics, together with digitization, was a horizontal issue, and which meant that in all actions, so in all these 17 actions, cultural statistics had to be considered where appropriate. And one of these 6 priorities, for example, was gender equality. And I had the pleasure to chair an open method of coordination expert group. Maybe some of you are familiar with the OMC groups. This is one of the most important working methods. And for gender equality, there was an expert group set up, and we dealt in detail with gender issues on the position of women and gender gaps they face for this topic. And also progress has been made over the last years. A lot remains to be done. The current work plan, it was already mentioned also by the director of the Commission, is coming to an end, and a new one was prepared under the present Czech presidency, and 1 out of 20 actions will be devoted to cultural statistics, since we keep encountering the same problems in many cultural topics, and this refers to the lack of cultural data. So I can only fully support the main findings of the pilot projects for new methods of measuring, and especially an updated framework for common definitions and classifications of the CCS is needed. And there is also a necessity to improve data collection, especially with regard to quality data and with regard to gender issues. And also on working conditions, which is another topical issue. And it is also very important to take into account the various aspects of the digital change. This is something which is really very important. So I'm coming to my conclusions, which are quite simple, but I think also very essential. There is no doubt about the importance and necessity of cultural statistics to collect comparable and reliable and updated statistical data, to analyze it, and this has to be followed by processing and by publishing this data. The availability of cultural data and statistical findings are crucial for different reasons. And this is also something very simple and clear, and has to be, but it has to be reminded. It's an important source of information for raising awareness on specific issues and challenges in the cultural sector, and in particular for good decision-making and developing appropriate policies. This requires further joint efforts and commitment from all of us, and we have to be ready to provide the resources in terms of expertise and also in funds. And as it was highlighted, so the economic contribution of the cultural, I would also like to highlight the intrinsic value of the cultural sector. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Heidi, for your contribution and perspective from the Council and for the support to the result of the research. Now, I would like to give the floor to Jarkko Pasanen. As you can deduct, he's from Finland. He worked for quite a long time in Finland in the statistics environment, but for more than 20 years he's been active and working at Eurostat, and he is now the head of unit of Eurostat's F1 unit on social indicators, methodology and development related with users. So in a perfect position to analyze and to contribute to this conversation. Jarkko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'm really honored and to be part of this panel with very honorable members of Parliament and Council. And as said, I work at Eurostat in the domain of statistics, and naturally in the definitions of creative industries or sectors, statistics is not part of there. But as a personal note, my father was a journalist and my mother is author, so I have a personal point of this. When we look at today's work, the first thing I want to say that I really congratulate the consortiums and Professor Villares' team to the and Ignaz's work on what they have done, putting together the proposals that how a
Sorry, we have an issue. Can you stop? Can you, sorry, Jarkko, I think, can you restart again your last sentence? Now it's okay. There was an issue with the communication. Please follow.
I had a shock moment just before my presentation. Something collapsed, and I hope I can get there. Anyways, but I was going to say that I really congratulate the work. But then, of course, we all see from their work and generally that the domain of cultural and creative statistics is very manifold. There are so many dimensions that it's very not easy to capture all of them. We speak about, of course, the economic dimension as the very important driver in the European economy, but we should never forget also the well-being part and the cultural and even creative sector input to the well-being of the citizens of Europe, as even mental health. Also, we have to look at and never forget how the professionals in the field, how are their social status and working conditions, and as well as the gender dimension. We, of course, at Eurostat try to put all these things together. We follow our political leaders and policy leaders' the proposals. This been put together in the work plan for culture, where you heard that we will DGF will give we will get a new work plan for the coming years, where we try to follow. So the domain is very demanding in that sense that there are many stakeholders, many dimensions to look at. We at Eurostat, we try to, of course, fulfill the demands as far as we can. Our mandate, as you might know, is that our raison d'etre is to provide data for evidence-based policies, so that the policymakers can design, monitor, and make impact assessments on whatever policy they do. In this area, of course, it's a cultural and creative sector, what they want to do. In that role, we try to produce or collect from the member states data. We try to develop the data, and we want to disseminate harmonized data. So this is basically in a nutshell what we are doing is, of course, the official statistics cannot always cater all the needs, in particular in the cultural area, in the creative sector, partially because it's not a clear bordered defined areas. And in that, the consortium's work's been very useful for Eurostat, because with that we can take forward the work on the cultural sector and cultural statistics and creative sector statistics. We also, of course, welcome all ideas and all approaches for new data and alternative data sources concerning digital economy, and we welcome these proposals for extending the scope. I would like to emphasize that we at Eurostat, we could provide certain weighted data. I will try to share to the chat our dedicated section where we have collected the information that we currently have culture statistics. And you can see from there that what are we currently doing, which type of a data sets we had, what type of articles we have produced. I will end my short expose by saying that what the consortium has done, in particular on the defining and improving the scope of the cultural and creative sector statistics. Here's the idea here is to take it forward. We have and are in process of establishing a small task force where we will find out that which parts we can take quickly to the production and where we need more discussion. In addition, what we like and what we will be considering of doing is to develop and give guidance of cultural and creative sector accounts to further improve the statistical base that is available for the policymakers. So that said, I like to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Indeed, we are all interested in looking forward. Just a couple of comments. First, I assume we will take 10 more minutes from what was expected, not much more, but that's for you and your schedules. This will last 10, max 15 minutes more than what was originally scheduled, but definitely not more than that. And second, there's coming in, several questions are coming in, both via the YouTube platform and here about the report itself, of course, and that's absolutely understandable. So the report is going to be launched at the end of this event. Okay, at the very end of this event, the report will be available, launched online, and you will be able to see it and to download it and to check it through our website, which will be repeated at the end of this discussion. Now let's follow this up with another angle. And in that angle, we bring into the conversation Professor Villares, but he doesn't need any further presentation. And then I would like to welcome Enrico Turin, who is an economist himself with a degree in economics at the University of Luigi Bocconi in Milano, and an expert also in international affairs. So, of course, that is always an angle important when you're working at the European level. And he's representing he's deputy director of the Federation of European Publishers. And now European Package exactly is written there, and he has also an expertise specific in statistics. So beyond his own expertise as a stakeholder and his representation, he has some knowledge on the topic itself. So within the limits of the time we have, you can definitely take the floor. Enrico, please.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. Good afternoon, everyone. Precisely as was mentioned, in my role as, more economist in this case than deputy director of the Federation of European Publishers, I'm in charge, among other things, of collecting data about the book market in Europe, and I'm very well aware of the challenges and difficulties that we have. I won't say anything revolutionary about why this exercise is extremely important and why we think that measuring the cultural and creative sectors is relevant for us. The reasons have been spelled out very clearly already by Dr. Eller, Ms. Meissnitzer, and other speakers, but I want to still underline the fact that this whole measurement matters, first of all, because the cultural and creative sectors and industries matter. They matter for the economy, but which already would be sufficient reason to take them into account and to try to understand them better. But they also have the advantage that not all sectors have of having significant positive externalities, as in they're also beneficial for culture, for society, for democracy, and we see more and more the focus also, they're more important and positive for the well-being of our citizens. So why do we need precise measurements or to improve the measurement of the sectors? On the one hand, we need to put these sectors on the map to ensure that when, in particular, policymakers talk about the importance of the sectors and support to the sectors, they go beyond a simple lip service to something nice that is culture. We're talking about sectors that deserve all the attention that they claim for. And we need this kind of measurement in order to be able to assess the impact of policies, which is essential, the whole notion of evidence-based policy. Now, what do we see as the main challenges and areas for improvement? First of all, we need the will to do this seriously. As I said, not to just say, yes, it would be good to know more, but to actually get our act together and do it. And for that, I'm glad to see that with this project, we may be onto something. We need all the member states to be fully in on the project and start acting towards this improvement of the framework. We need them to adopt a consistent methodology, to engage with all the stakeholders in their respective countries, and to be serious about it, which it means also being willing to change where we see that the existing methods do not work. I like always to compare, to say that especially non-economists actually tend to think about data as potatoes. So something that is buried somewhere, and all you need to know is go there and dig, and you'll find them. No, phenomena are there, but data come from the measurement of the phenomena. So it's not enough to say, let's go and find the data there. Someone is hiding them. So they're somewhere, let's dig. Some data exist and you need to find them. Some data have to be created by measuring the phenomena. So, for example, just a couple more considerations. Can be that we haven't done a reading survey through Eurostat, at least as far as I can tell, in more than 10 years. Now we are in a project under Creative Europe Aldous Up that is developing a common methodology for reading habit surveys. So this kind of stuff, simple stuff, even, yes, there will always be gray areas, but it cannot be that we don't even know how much European people are reading, not how many, or how many people and how much they read. It's impossible. It cannot be that we don't even know how many books are published in every country. It's not, something marginal that it's so difficult. And we need to clean up also the situation that is very specific of the NASE codes, because a single NASE code can often relate to a company that does many different things, and that we find it a technical barrier very significant to a clear understanding of the sectors. Thanks, and sorry for taking a few seconds more.
No, thank you. I mean, we would all love to have a much longer conversation. So, Andrea, you are a potato collector, a potato manager. You work at Eurostat. You work with data, and yes, you are working specifically with culture and sport statistics. So, why would you like to share? I mean, we've heard already from Eurostat, and we've heard a lot of analysis, and people might be, but we would like to hear your angle because you have an expertise directly on this field. So, yes, and then I would like, just for you to know, I would like to leave some time for Manuel Villares to make some comments on questions that I will put that are coming from the audience. So if you can,
I had prepared something for around 7-8 minutes, but probably I will need to cut some of the things.
Yes, okay. Yes, please. Yes, please.
It's clear. So originally I had developed this conversation to speak about relevance, challenges and difficulties, as it is the name of the panel. Sure. So I will do that very quickly, possibly on 3 key points, which are measuring, the culture and creative sectors. It's not by accident, as we are in a context of a meeting, of an event exactly on measuring the CCS. But then also would like to say something about the digital goods and services, the way in which we can measure them, and also the social impact of the culture and creative sectors. So maybe I will skip the part on the relevance, because I also have prepared something on relevance, but it's clear to everyone why and how it is relevant measuring the culture and creative sector. So I will go directly to, for each of these 3 points, to the difficulties and the challenges, where for challenges, I don't mean synonymous of difficulty, but really what we can do in order to improve our measurements. So point number 1, measuring cultural and culture and creative sectors. The difficulties comes from the fact that I think that if now I ask to, I don't know, 100 participants to this event to list at least 50 items that they believe constitute culture, we would get 100 different lists. So this is really clear. And so imagine the difficulty in finding a consensus among 27 member states of the European Union, plus EFTA countries, candidates, and whatever. So here, I think 2 concepts are helpful in this sense to understand this complexity. And these concepts are reliability and validity. So the first one, reliability, refers a little bit to what to the confidence that we have when we say something about a phenomenon, that it is purely technical in this sense, because we get our information from many data sources. So sometimes we have problems of sample size, etc. But then there is another aspect which I think it's more relevant in this context, which is validity. And it refers to the extent to which what we say about the phenomenon actually corresponds to the idea that we have about that phenomenon. And for culture, it's particularly complex. And in this sense, I would like to bring a quick example from one of the candidates of the delegates, sorry, of our expert group on cultural statistics. This person was telling us really that culture is changing over time. This is clear to everyone. And the example is the following. They have in Denmark a very long time series with culture participation data. But at the beginning, in the 70s, they were asking people as a proxy for cultural participation if they had a walk in the forest or to the woods, something like that. So today, I'm not sure that we would ask to people if they, during the weekend, went to the forest as a form of cultural participation. But this really reflects to the fact that culture is changing not only in space, and this is really the job of Eurostat to ensure the comparability in space between the member states, but also in time. So that is also another good reason for updating from time to time our common understanding of culture. So the challenge in this sense, to recall the title of our panel, is really to produce a good definition which combines both the theoretical scope, what we mean by culture in 27 member states, with a data-driven approach. And we have to look at the data in order to see what they tell us before defining something. So, for example, we might have good reasons for saying that the software publishing sector is a creative sector, but then we have to analyze what the data tell us, and because if we count everything together as culture with one label of culture, the other parts of the sector might disappear. So we really need to combine a theoretical approach to a data-driven approach. Then something about the digital goods and services. Again, relevance, I will not say how much relevant is it today. But again, going back to what I said about reliability and validity of the data, I have to say that in particular, with some techniques, what we get from web scraping or APIs, it's really black box sometimes. We can count the number of views of a video, we can see which are the most streamed songs like that, but we don't have much information about the specific algorithms that are used for calculating these statistics. And we don't have much of information, for example, on the side of the demand. Very simply, for example, the number of users of Spotify. We don't have access to that kind of information. So this is, to me, a typical situation in the big data field, let's say, when we have powerful tools, but we are not sure about what to do and really what kind of information, what policy advice we can get from those data. So to me, the challenge in this field of the digital goods and services is to get the data from the source. And here also I have some example. At Eurostat, we have an agreement in the tourism sector with the 3 biggest online booking companies. So we get data directly from that. So you might say that it's impossible to get data from Spotify, YouTube, or Google, whatever. But actually, the counter argument is that it's easier for these big companies to provide data to one big and official and institutional body rather than seeing data circulating from web scraping techniques or getting 27 requests from 27 member states, etc. In Spain, for example, another nice example, in the census, they had an agreement with phone companies, and they get the data in order to monitor the movement of people in space. So you see, it is possible to find agreement and to get the data from the sources. Third point, very quickly, the relevance of the social impact. So I have to say that to me, we have a quite well-structured amount of information about the economic impact of the culture and creative sector. We are far, I think, from having a clear view of the social impact of the culture and creative sectors. And if you read any policy paper concerning culture, it is really about the social contribution of culture. For example, I read here, I have the work plan for culture, the last one. It speaks about harnessing the power of culture and cultural diversity for social cohesion and well-being, making the most of the potential of culture to foster sustainable development and peace. But what do we know about that? Do we have data to measure this phenomenon? So difficulties, the first difficulty in this sense is to find the data, but also to me, assess the direction of the causality. For example, is it cultural participation that causes a certain state of well-being, for example, or is it the contrary, meaning that there is some kind of personal well-being which is responsible for higher cultural participation? Do you go to the museum and after you improve your well-being, or you go to the museum because you actually have a good state of well-being? And the same is at the macro level when we observe the aggregate indicators. That is it a certain level of social, economic wellness of our society which leads to cultural development, or on the contrary, it is some cultural endowment of the state which can help the development of our society? So the challenge here is really to find a clear message about what is, and something measurable possibly about what is the social impact of the culture and creative sectors. And for example, I can mention a few very specific examples here. In the next months, and I'm glad to say this also because it came out in some interventions before during this event. In the next months at Eurostat, we will publish a dedicated section on gender equality in the cultural field. So this is a very specific social issue which we are addressing. And also, just to do a little bit of advertising of our data, this year we will have this famous ad hoc module on cultural participation, because we do have a module. It's not an ad hoc survey, but it is a module within the famous EU Silk data collection, which is the EU survey on income and living conditions. So we will have the chance to explore also some other social determinants and social outcomes of the culture and creative participation. So thank you very much for your efforts and for organizing this great meeting and event. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to you both. And then Professor Villares, in fact, I mean, there have been many questions. I've been taking notes, and at some point, I think that some questions might be answered by reading the report itself, because this is just being a summary of the report. So I've read the report in detail, each one of its pages, and I can tell you that some of the questions that are popping up have the replies there, perhaps not all of them. And one question that appears interesting in terms of looking forward is, you mentioned that before, but perhaps you want to develop that a little bit, Professor Villares, is in terms of implementing these conclusions, these recommendations, to what extent you believe that it would be interesting to use a proper EU legal instrument. So should these be moved into a regulation, part of it? So how would you move forward to ensure that this is not just, let's be clear, recommendations that appear there, that, okay, a lot of goodwill, a lot of lip service, but verba volunt, and people also move offices and responsibilities, and for this to have stability, is it important to turn this into a piece of legal work and to turn it into your regulation, or how would you do that? You're muted, Professor Villares, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. First of all, let me say that to thank all the participants for the very nice and very interesting references. Now, before answering to your question, I would like to put the accent in 2 points, basically, that were also in the documentation that was distributed, also remarked. First, 1 point. Sometimes you say you need to measure. But to measure, it's very important. It's measure is not enough. We need a good system, a good and reliable measurement system. This is, sometimes to measure wrongly, in a wrong way, is worse than not to measure. This is a very important question, because all of you know that if we take a bad measurement generate bad information, and bad information generate bad decisions. This is clear point that this circle is very known in management, but applies to all fields, including clear to the cultural and creative sectors. And in this, in my presentation, I think in all, we make always a very important accent in information comparability. Because information comparability is across countries unanimous considered a central requirement of information quality. And this requirement is still of information comparability is still more important when the countries make part of an economic and political organization, such as is the case of European Union. And then I come back to your question. In fact, to have, for instance, one of the points that is a big difficulty for this theories comparable at EU level is the lack of a common definition at EU level. It's clear. Even the denomination, there are no common denomination. It is clear. So to adopt a common definition is a win-win situation. I think all the countries win with this, and this is something that is indispensable for assuring clearly the comparability of data. And to adopt this common definition, but you have basically two ways. One is a gentleman agreement. Okay, you can have a gentleman agreement, but the best way is to have a clear regulation where, as it is proposed, where the definition and the denomination should be there. But this regulation should be discussed by the member states, in particular by the expert group on cultural statistics. So I think this it's nothing special. We are talking about statistical definitions. We are not talking about nothing. We're talking about this. And what do we say? When we express, we have to say exactly the same thing. Otherwise, for instance, take in case of international comparability, take an example. For instance, even in cultural participation. But at this moment, the data is not comparable. If you make a ranking, okay, there is a ranking and decides that we should support the countries where cultural participation is lower. Okay, but it happens then the ranking is wrong because the data are not comparable. So where you should start? First to measure correctly and to have data that are comparable. Otherwise, you will take wrong decisions. So this is in key points. These are key points that in fact in our opinion, a regulation would help. It's not. I don't like other regulations too much. When I was in official statistics as president of statistical office in Portugal, when the Eurostat could sometimes come with a regulation, in principle, I didn't like very much of regulation. I have seen that among the participants is Yves Franchet, that was Director General of Eurostat at that time. He knows very well this. And that's why I'm again. But in certain cases, it's when you talk about definition and concepts, it's very important that you use the same definition. Otherwise, I think it will be very complex.
So definitely listening to you, I mean, it's clear that this started politically. And I think it will not end, but it will return to politics. What started politically will return politically. That's a personal opinion here. So I'm going a little bit away from moderator, but I'm authorized to do that in this last panel. Started politically, meaning as a decision, as Dr. Heller mentioned specifically, that without clear data, you don't know exactly what the situation of the cultural and creative sectors are. And without knowing that, you cannot really introduce them with the proper strength they have, introduce that sector with the strength it deserves in the cultural and in the industrial and economic policy of Europe. So that's why it started politically, meaning it started with the vote at European Parliament. Then it moved, of course, into the technical corner provided by experts at Eurostat, and of course the research team that has produced these, and looking at it in a very technical way. And if I look at the different comments we've had, an intervention we've had, it shows that we have a lot of technical interest among our listeners today, both on Zoom and on YouTube. I mean, there's been people questioning the NACE coding itself. There's been people discussing, to what extent you can review a series with 2 short periods, because that would challenge the stability of the statistical series. So there are different people also. There's been an intervention regarding, the fact that ISCO has also ISCO has also codes labeled partly cultural, and so on employment. So what happens with employment statistics, and is this how is it measured when you have part of that considered cultural and non-cultural, and so on, and also specific questions to what extent design is included in advertisement and publishing. So there are a number of technical questions. As I say, part of them, they are not replied, but dealt with by the report itself. Others will remain open, and others will be dealt with by the experts and professionals. But definitely there is a political decision here. This is, do we want consistent statistics in Europe? And do we want a legal basis for that really is imposed across Europe and is imposed to European authorities, and it is imposed to national authorities themselves. And at that point, I believe that this will return to where it started, which is to European Parliament. Of course, the Commission is the one who can have the initiative, but eventually the Parliament might be requesting that from the Commission. So I believe that is what is ahead, statistical and technical work, which shows that certain things can be done. I mean, the most important result, I believe, from what has been done on the online economy is to show what is possible. Nothing of it is final. I mean, nothing of what has been produced in the online economy part of this report is final, but it does open an avenue of showing this is possible, and the data are there, and you need to go and get them, and there's a way to get them and a way to process them in a systematic manner. So I believe that this is the most important result of this report, to show what is possible, to show what is out there, to make, of course, a number of specific proposals. And then now it is the role of policymakers, technical policymakers, that's Eurostat, you are also policymakers and the decision makers, higher level policy, but still at the Commission, and then Parliament to decide what to do with this and to put their energy where the lips are, which is the only way that things move forward, and to really implement these conclusions in an effective way. And with this, I think it's the moment to close. I apologize if we've not replied to as many questions as were there, but there's been a lot of this is going to be registered, so you can listen to some of these replies afterwards. And let me check here before I go. I would like to have Catherine Magnon to close. So before I give the floor to Catherine Magnon, yes, Professor Villares, final comment?
Yes. One small note, because sometimes there are natural with good intention, but there are some people that are against the use of a common definition because they say it is important to customize the concepts, and chaque EU member states have specific needs. It's correct. But this is possible, in my idea, and this is explained in the report, it is possible to customize the definition, so to adopt the same definition at the EU level, and at the same time customize for each member state. So you can deal with both goals, and not only, and this question of having a common concept is key. And you can at the same time customize without putting this important objective in.
When Europe wants, I can tell you, when Europe wants, it is very good at finding a balance between something that is common for everybody and something that can still be tailor-made for each one of the countries.
Exactly,
Europe has a very long, example, a very long experience in doing that, and this would be a great case to do that. So before I give the floor to Catherine Magnon to close definitely this full event, I want to underline what I said before, just in passing. Now I'm saying it more solemnly. The report is out there. You can reach the report at our website, 423. That is kind of a moment of a launching. Okay, and you can now check the final report of the project at measuringccs.eu. You have there the full report, the information, I think also the national data, the national fact sheet. So everything is out there for you to download, to check, and eventually, of course, to criticize, but it will be in other contexts. And with this, thank you, Catherine Magnon, for joining us. Catherine, you are the head of the cultural policy unit within the European DG AC at the European Commission. You have a very, very long expertise within the Commission and outside, and a personal commitment, which I know of, which goes beyond, pure administrative job. You're personally committed to culture and the cultural and creative sectors, so you know a lot about this. And I would kindly invite you to take the floor to close this event. Catherine, please.
Thank you, Ignacy, and thanks to everyone. It's been a fantastic 2 hours and really extremely rich exchanges. I'm delighted that the report is out, and I'm sure that it will have a very large audience. It's a really impressive work that you've been conducting, all of you, the consortium, over those last 2 years. And I'm sure that with what you've put on the table, both the report and the national fact sheets, we have now, you have brought the ball of the reflection, the common reflection, one step further, and we have quite a lot of food for thought to really progress, because some of the last speakers, in particular Enrico and Andrea, have said in the last session, culture counts for Europe. That's something we can all agree on, but we have to count what counts. Otherwise, we can't defend it. Otherwise, we cannot design the right policies. And what counts for Europe, culture, is changing, as you've seen, as you've explained very well, with this lovely example from a walk in the forest being considered a cultural activity in the 70s, to our teenagers now spending their time on digital screens. Culture is changing, so we must be able to capture this evolution. So we need statistics, we need data, we need a good measurement framework, and it's very, very encouraging to hear that Eurostat and the colleagues who are here today are ready to set up a task force to work on this issue. As you know, on the side of the policymakers, we have this will, both in the Commission, but also in our member states, like Heidi Meissinser reminded us. There is this political will to continue improving the framework for cultural statistics. It is definitely important. We need reliable and comparable data at European level to be able to design the right policies. So the work plan for culture, which will be adopted at the end of the month and which will start from next year until 2026, has a section on cultural statistics. So we have the cultural, we have the political will. We have the technical input coming from the researchers, the consortium that you put together and coordinated, Ignacy. We have the amazing capacity and the will as well of Eurostat. So with all that, I do hope that we will be able in a few years' time to look back at the meeting of today and your report as, the starting point of a new in-depth reflection and actually production of comparable and reliable statistic on the cultural and creative sectors in Europe. We really need them. And I will just finish by saying that I find it extremely interesting how in this meeting today, we started from a very technical approach and ended up into what was a political, but also at times philosophical debate, on what is culture, what makes us European, and why we need to measure all that. So with that, I really want to congratulate you again for this amazing work you've been doing. And I want to assure you of our commitment to continue, progressing in this matter. And I really want to encourage the audience to read the report, comment, contribute, and help us progress further when it comes to measuring what we love, culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with this, we close. The report is out there. This very event will be, I think we need a little bit of time to process it, but it will be uploaded. The recording of this event will be also be made available through the social channels that we've been putting forward for this project, and also in the website. So all the materials are there, and thank you for your time. Thank you to the speakers, to each one of you, for your time, for joining us today. And of course, thank you to all of you who have been following this conversation through both channels. Thank you, everybody. And with this, we close the event.